Mr. Speaker, and I will be sharing my time with the member from Edmonton West. Before Christmas, I had a woman in my office. I'm not going to name her name. She's a single mom. She came in. She is a out-of-work, one of the many out-of-work engineers in Calgary. She couldn't afford daycare because she'd been out of work for 18 months, so she brought her son into my office. And you know what her ask was? Her ask wasn't for millions of dollars of help. It was just, I just want to work. I want to help other women who are in my situation that are laid off. I want to work. And what she didn't say that I could see was that her kid hadn't had a new coat bought in 2 years. She hadn't had a new coat bought in several years. And here is a woman who can't afford to come out and pay billions of dollars of lobbyists and cronies to get a bailout like Bombardier did. She just wants to work. And this government is nowhere for them. This government is no better off than in 1982 when the current Prime Minister's father gave the one-finger salute to protesters in Salmon Arm who dared challenge the fact that a Trudeau government didn't give two rips about Western Canada. And here we are today, but here's the difference.
I'm sorry, which Trudeau were you referring to? Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
But here's the difference, Mr. Speaker. Western Canada impacts the entire country now. We stand in solidarity, Alberta energy sector workers stand in solidarity with workers who fly back and forth from the Maritimes, with steel workers from across the country, from people from British Columbia. Because a strong Alberta means a strong Canada, so you can't silence us anymore. But what does this government try to do? They're very clever. They've done everything except actually call it the National Energy Plan II. They've put uncertainty into the regulatory process for approving major resource projects. They've put a tax on everything that's not going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Anytime you ask them if it's going to show the demand assumptions around price elasticity, they can't do that. They put a consumption tax on this. The infrastructure minister who just rose in debate here spent $800,000 renovating his own office instead of doing anything in Alberta. All they do, as one of my colleagues behind me said, is manage to put together a bunch of jumble of buzzwords. But why? Because, you know what, frankly, they're ideologically opposed to our part of the country. And I say this not out of politics, but out of reality. And you know what? Every single one of my colleagues that sit behind me tonight know that this is right. And it's something that needs to be said. If we truly want Canada in 10, 20, 30 years, then the Prime Minister can't say that he wants to phase out the energy sector and then say he misspoke 2 weeks later. We can't have ideological, non-fact-based opposition to one of Canada's major job-creating sectors that we know can produce energy and one of the most ethical, effective, environmentally responsible ways in the entire world. We're a leader in that. That's one of our exports. But yet, you've got a Prime Minister and a caucus who just doesn't care. They don't care. They're more interested in $1,500 Rosedale cocktail soirees than about the woman who was in my office. They're more interested in anything other than standing up for just saying, to the woman who is in my office and wants to work, they don't care. They have done nothing for the people in my riding. So what is my ask for this government tonight? It's very simple. When they stand up here and waste time in Parliament on changing the Chief Statistician Council for a week and a half in debate, give a rip about Alberta. Stop ignoring the fact that we're part of this country, because you know what? At some point in time, we're not going to be quiet, and that starts tonight. So to everybody who's watching, we're not putting up with this anymore. And the talking points that the government is putting forward isn't cutting it. So on behalf of every person who's written to every one of the people who's standing behind me tonight, we're standing up for you, and we're standing up against that.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like the Honourable Member, I am also a proud Albertan. I have lived in Alberta for 34 years. And I know people who have been laid off or who have taken reduction in their hours of work. who are struggling. So the member, I would like to know from the member, does she support extending Canada Child benefits to struggling families? Does she not support EI extension benefits to laid-off workers? Does she not support our investment into innovation? Those are the things Canada Child benefit will lift 30,000 children out of poverty in Alberta. 30,000 children who are struggling today. Next year, they'll be better off. This year, they'll be better off compared to next year. Those are the investments we're making because we understand families are struggling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
I stand against that member spending $800,000 on office renovations when people are losing their homes in my city. I stand against that member imposing a new tax on everything when people can't make ends meet. I stand against that member standing up in the House of Commons and refusing to support the Energy East project. I stand against this member voting to raise CPP premiums at a point in time when people can't make ends meet. I stand up in this House and I stand against this member who claims to say that he knows Albertan and has done absolutely nothing to support our economy.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the member for her passionate speech, because I know she cares about the people in her community, and so do we. So do British Columbians, her neighbours. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters that are struggling right now. Mr. Speaker, what I'm really disappointed about that we're not having a conversation about tonight, how we got here, how we didn't protect communities when we are having downturns like this, like not putting money aside like Norway did to buffer us from situations like this. What are we going to do now? Get some money off the table from this government in their Clean Energy and Innovation Fund. And what are we going to do in the future so we can diversify our economy properly and protect our children and our grandchildren from dealing with this conversation that we've been having for decades and failing miserably?
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the government does not create jobs. Industry creates jobs.
Yeah.
So we need to ensure that we have a climate in which jobs can be created.
Right.
That's right.
Stop.
The infrastructure minister, Mr. Speaker,
Good
just
policy.
laughed at this
Good policy.
particular point. But why did he laugh at it? Because his government put in place a tax on everything when the economy is struggling.
Yeah.
Well, several taxes. He's destabilized the investment climate in the energy sector by complicating the regulatory process, which was already world-class.
Yeah.
He's failed to provide any sort of infrastructure except for a new chair for himself. If we want to have an economy that is not boom-bust, we need to have an economy that is attractive to investors. And the political instability that's been put in place across Canada by governments like Premier Notley and by this Prime Minister is not helping us.
Exactly.
We have time for a very brief question and answer. The honourable member for Medicine Hat, Carson Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The conditions in Medicine Hat are similar to how they are around the province. Our unemployment rate is nearly the height of a 5-year high or higher. Our unemployment rate right now rose from 2.7% in December of 2014 to 6.4% in 2016. When you translate that out, it only sounds like 3.7%, but it means over 6,000 people in our community lost their jobs in the last 2 years. Can the honourable member who just spoke explain to me and to this House how the Conservative Party's record on stimulating the economy and creating jobs has helped people in my riding in Alberta?
Full member for Calgary Nose Hill in 45 seconds or less.
This isn't about statistics. This is about people. And in the dying seconds of my part of this debate, I want this government to understand that this isn't about $1,500 fundraisers. This is about an entire province and community that's been demoralized because spouses, teachers, wives, husbands, everybody's out of work. Nobody's unaffected. So while we can quote unemployment rates and we can quote policy, at this point in time, this government needs to understand that Alberta is part of Canada. And without a strong Alberta, we do not have a strong Canada.